This is my talk for Kol Nidre for Erev Yom Kippur 5784, 2023. One of the most striking and most valuable parts of Yom Kippur is that we openly get to talk about our mortality, which gives me the chance to bring up heavy and difficult issues like death. Preparing for, presiding at funerals is an emotionally taxing part of being a rabbi, but it's also a meaningful process, helping see that life is properly remembered, seeing to burial in a manner consistent with the customs of the Jewish people, providing some comfort to those who mourn. Even I find comfort in being a part of that process. Sometimes, harder than funerals are shivas, and specifically a certain type of shiva, the poorly attended shiva. Sometimes they're scheduled at the last minute or on an inconvenient day. But shivas are supposed to be timing proof, scheduling proof, even popularity proof. But that's not always the case. Showing up for each other is a big part of what shuls are meant to be about, and I'm a Kiddush cup half full sort of guy. And the fact that you're listening, connected to the Jewish community, often volunteering, often paying for that privilege, believe me, I'm appreciative of that. And I know that no one, myself included, can do it all. But there are plenty of days across the year for back patting. This is the day we have set aside for breastfeeding. And there are shivas when I've looked out around the room and thought, really? This is it? I try not to let on. Mourners don't need to deal with my mishigas, but since Yom Kippur is a time when we acknowledge that there are times we fall short, I can say, there are times we fall short. We know our hearts are in the right place, but the question is why we fall short. Now hold that thought. A story and an echo. The story. It said that Rabbi Yehuda Loew ben Betzalel of Prague, known as the Maharal, was possessed of a sagacity that made him the recognized leader of his community. No rationalist, there's a legend in Agadah that makes him famous. When around the year 1590, the Jews of Prague were threatened with a pogrom, meaning an angry mob gathered around the Jewish community, fueled by the wild lie that Jews used the blood of Gentile children to make matzah. The false accusation is no legend. Blood libels were all too common. Raising an angry mob by playing on people's fears is nothing new. The Maharal of Prague was renowned for great wisdom, and the legend is that he possessed the knowledge of how to create life using only a lump of clay, words of Torah, and the very name of God. So when the angry mobs came, there was little the Jews of Prague could do to save their homes, their businesses, even their lives. Using the mud from the river Vlatava, the Maharal formed a man of clay, circled it while chanting the sacred words, inscribed the word emet, meaning truth, in the clay of the form's forehead, and placed the Shem HaMeforash, the name of God, in its mouth. Now, Golem means lifeless lump of clay, and when the Maharal breathed into this Golem, it came to life. The Golem knew no limits. It would follow orders explicitly until told to stop, and did not have the power of speech. And the Golem of Prague defended the embattled community in one fantastic feat of strength after another. It turns out there are a few different versions of the story. It was time, and different versions of how this ended. In one, the Golem saves the Jewish community, and as time passes, his services are no longer needed. The Maharal takes the sacred name of God out of its mouth, and the life force leaves with it. The husk of the Golem remains in the attic of the Alt-Nu Shul in Prague, waiting for the moment when his services are needed again. More commonly, the story ends less well. The Golem was normally off duty for Shabbos. The rabbi takes the sacred name out of the Golem's mouth every Friday afternoon, but neglects to do so one week. And the Golem goes on a tear, going full supervillain on everything it sees. At the last moment, meaning both before complete destruction comes and just before candle lighting, the rabbi is able to grab the name of God from the Golem's mouth. It collapses into shards, which are collected and stored in the attic of the Alt-Nu Shul. Or in the version told by Jacob Grimm, the elder brother of the famous Brothers Grimm, the Golem grew a bit larger each day, eventually reaching a terrifying size, and the Jews, whom the Golem was created to defend, became frightened. So the rabbi asked the Golem to take off his boots. When the Golem bent down to do so, the rabbi leapt, wiped the aleph off his forehead, so instead of saying emet, truth, it now said met, Hebrew for he dies. With that, the massive Golem drops dead, crushing its creator to death in the process. The Brothers Grimm versions always go darker. Why do I tell this story? The story of a creature that we build with good intentions, then grows to an uncontrollable size, then causes harm, is not limited to the Golem of Prague, nor to its literary descendants. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator. We heard his echo when Sam Altman and OpenAI's ChatGPT-4 arrived, or its artificial intelligence competitors like Google Bard or Meta Facebook's Llama. Altman himself, along with hundreds of other AI developers and execs, warned that, to quote their one-sentence statement in full, quote, mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. The internet can suck our time and keep us from in-person human interaction, and AI can be next level when its creators are concerned about human extinction level events. From their creation, we have a golem on our hands, and it is safe to say it operates without the name of God in its mouth. Humans have a habit of adapting any technology we can develop, so AI-saturated lives are probably not a question of if, but when. Our task is to be equipped to deal with the change. We can do this. The naive belief that science and technology and religion are foes, opposing forces, has long been forcefully rejected by mainstream Judaism. They're complementary ways of understanding the blessings of existence. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, wrote, science is about explanation, religion is about meaning. Science analyzes, religion integrates. Science breaks things down to their component parts. Religion binds people together in relationships of trust. Science tells us what is. Religion tells us what ought to be. Science describes. Religion beckons, summons, calls. Science sees objects. Religion speaks to us as subjects. Science practices detachment. Religion is the art of attachment, self to self and soul to soul. Science is the conquest of ignorance. Religion is the redemption of solitude. My golem unease is right under what Rabbi Sachs is saying. Our digital lives are flooded with information, and communication is easier than ever, but somehow we're having trouble balancing getting to the redemption of solitude. This year, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy declared an epidemic of loneliness and isolation, calling it, quote, an underappreciated public health crisis that has harmed individual and societal health. Digital communications were supposed to better connect us, and that sometimes happens, but the opposite is also happening. The consequences of loneliness include poor health outcomes in any number of areas, including increased stroke risk, development of dementia, depression, even premature death. The number of people saying, "No one really knows me," continues to rise, even though sharing has never been easier. Sadly, even rates that individuals taking their own lives are higher among adults and youth. And it's not just here. The UK has appointed a national minister for loneliness, as has Japan. We know we can find and maintain friendships online. It's just a matter of ensuring that, whenever possible, more direct human connections remain, and like the golem, that what we create to protect us doesn't end up endangering us. When I'm at a sparsely attended shiva, sometimes I think of these facts. We're exhausted at the end of a long day. We have so many obligations, so many options to unwind. Who needs another obligation? But it's those obligations that allow us to go to sleep knowing I made a difference today. Now, if loneliness is often a side effect of our hyperconnected and disconnected age, how is it addressed? You probably can guess my answer. Spending time together, face-to-face or shoulder-to-shoulder, we need 10 for a minyan. And people think that's for God, and that's partly right. Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchat Torah, Shabbat after Shabbat after Shabbat, mitzvah after mitzvah after mitzvah, all of it brings us together to build a culture that can and has lasted aeons. And Dr. Ilana Stein-Hain at the Hartman Institute points out, you cannot have continuity of culture without a sense of obligation. You cannot have continuity of culture without a sense of obligation. That's simply how culture works. We need a sense of obligation to something outside of ourselves to transmit a culture over time. Mitzvah, not just as good deed, but also as commandment. And as Dr. Stein-Hain says, obligation is not just a burden, but cultivating a sense of obligation is a moral good. Not just a self-help good, but a moral good. Not just a practical or emotional good, moral good. Obligation takes my thoughts out of just my own sphere of concern and forces me to think of others and their needs. Do others need me in the minyan? Would they benefit from my hosting a Shabbat dinner? Do I have the time to help those in need? Will future generations be culturally or spiritually impoverished if I don't build a meaningful Jewish life, a flourishing Jewish community? I have an obligation to do what I can. Obligation is a moral good. Autonomy is a moral good too. We're blessed to live in a time and a place where people are less frequently forced into roles and long-term situations that make their lives miserable. But again, there's a balance of autonomy and obligation that we can reach. So prayer isn't your thing. We've got a house committee. It's a different way to protect our holy Torah. Or help organize social events, or learn Torah, organize events around holidays, take a bit of the burden off a committee chair. The Chevra Kadisha, upholding the sacred traditions of Jewish burial, needs help. Please talk with me if you can help with that incredible mitzvah. So if you can't stand the idea of being the odd one out at a shiva in an unfamiliar house, it's not your thing, okay. But helping with, say, shul security, or grant writing, or long-term planning, a whole host of activities allows the shiva to happen. We can fulfill our mission and create connections. A diverse community has different entry points, each necessary, each one a hedge against the loneliness epidemic, each one a mitzvah that helps protect people against turning into golems that seem, against people turning to golems that seem to solve short-term problems but grow into dangers. Because the Maharal of Prague wasn't the first to speak life into being. There was a precedent for that, before that. In Bereshit, in the beginning, in the first chapter of the Torah, we get a story of creation, and there's a lot of good in it. Ki tov. God creates, the light is good, ki tov. The land and the seas are good, ki tov. The animals are good, ki tov. But what does it mean, good? We learn what's good by comparing to what is not good. After all the ki tovs, there is one lo tov, a not good. Lo tov eiyot ha'adam levado. It is not good for a human to be alone, God says. Why? We only know ourselves in relation to each other, and so we need relationships with each other to know ourselves. Adam doesn't name himself before he sees another human. We are ourselves in relation to each other. This is what the philosopher Martin Buber taught, first in Germany, then in Jerusalem after 1938. We can have I-it relationships, where we treat another person as an object, an it, like a cashier at a supermarket. We might treat as little more than the mechanical self-checkout, or a front desk clerk, who we might treat like a check-in app. Now, with interactive AI, more of our time will be spent interacting not just with a person we treat as an it, but with an it we treat as a person, a golem. It's getting harder to keep our balance. Or, Buber says, we can have an I-thou relationship, in which you see the other person as a person in all their humanity, with hopes and dreams, loves and foibles and strengths, and fully B'Tselem Elohim, the very image of God here on earth. And the I-thou relationship can change the other, but it can also change us. The way we gain personal meaning, personal worth, personal value, the way we redeem ourselves from existential loneliness is to engage in relationships called I-thou. It can be with family, or with a spouse, or with a friend. Sometimes a chance encounter leaves us feeling seen and feeling known, feeling like we're less alone. You can have a family member you treat as an it. You can have a family member you treat as a thou. You can have a romantic partner you treat as an it and not a thou. You can have a casual friend who you treat as a thou and not merely an it, or a teacher, or a coworker. We can't do this with everyone. We've all got limits. Every so often I'll get off the phone with someone talking about their troubles, and I'll call the next person. Every so often I'll get off the phone and cry. I thou, to my surprise. The person sitting behind you at shul can be an it. In front of you in traffic, definitely an it. Show up at Shiva, and you know they see you as a thou. I had one night of Shiva here for my father, January 1st. People could have claimed it as a vacation day. I don't know how many were here, but it filled the social hall. It was more people than I could speak with. It was people who saw me, I realized, not as an it, rabbi's functionary, I pay dues, it's fee for service. But they saw me as a human, mourning a loss. Rabbi, I contribute to a community so we can have a community that sees each other as a thou, that we're in a covenant of faith, and a covenant of fate. One of the great scholars of Jewish mysticism, Gershom Scholem, contemporary of Buber's, born in Germany, moved to Jerusalem in the 1920s. Scholem warned of the digital age in 1965. Sholem told computer scientists and researchers at Israel's Weizmann Institute in 1965, quote, "The old Golem was based on a mystical combination of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which are the elements and building stones of the world. The new Golem is based on a simpler and, at the same time, more intricate system. Instead of 22 elements, it knows only two, the numbers 0 and 1, constituting the binary system of representation. Everything can be translated or transposed into these two basic signs." Sholem went on to note the power and the promise and the dangers of the digital age, and he concluded, "I resign myself and say to the Golem and its creator, develop peacefully and don't destroy the world. Shalom." I don't know if the power to stop our generation's Golem is in our hands. The word emet, truth, is long erased from his forehead, the name of God long removed from his mouth, and still the Golem grows. Our task is to build meaningful lives for our community, for everyone in our area, and to ensure the same opportunities are here for future generations to come. The great 19th century Lithuanian rabbi Yisrael Salanter said, "They say that the Maharal of Prague took some clay and fashioned a miraculous golem to protect the Jewish people. That would be a great miracle. Yet it is an even greater miracle to take any individual, a limited flesh and blood mixed traits human being, and turn him into a mensch." None of us know how to make a golem, giving life to a lump of clay. All of us know how to take on the obligations that make ourselves into a mensch, and help others, those here and those yet to be born, be able to do the same. Lo tov ehiyot adam levado. It is not good for a person to be alone. Thank God we know the cure. Gemar Chatima Tova. May we and all be inscribed for a life of connection, of mourning, of growth, and of health, and of fulfillment. Shna Tova and Good Yom Tov.